this is the introduction to algebra tiles. If you've never seen them before, they look like this. They kind of resemble base 10 pieces, but they look a little different. Interesting to know, they're two-sided, so one side is black. This represents positive, and the other side is negative. And they also have these weird gaps or white spaces in the middle. We'll talk about this on our next slide. Okay, so all of these pieces, each type of tile is named for its area. In this case, the smallest square is going to have a side length of 1 by a 1. So this is called a 1 square unit or a 1 unit tile. Now what I like to have the kids do is I have them color code any side length that is the same length, color that the same color. So if you do that, you'll notice, okay, all around this square obviously is the same because it's a square, but this side length is also the same as this length, and this is the same as this. So knowing that, that means that that length must have to be 1. And then we're presented with these weird lengths here. And this is where the weird white gap comes into play. What this is representing or trying to represent is that it's an unknown length. It's an unknown number. And in math, we use these things called variables. They're letters that represent any number. The number could be 1/2, or it could be 1,000,000. It's totally, it can totally change. So in this case, this side length is being represented by the variable x. So if this is x, then we know that all the other pink sides must be x. Now remember that their names come from their areas. So to find the area of a rectangle, you're going to do length times width. In this case, it's 1 times x, and the area is x, which this makes it an x tile. Over here, you're doing x times x, which is the same thing as x squared, which is called an x squared tile. So we're going to look at each of these pieces a little more in depth on the next page. So we're going to look at the area and perimeter of each of these pieces. We know that this one we just covered was an area of 1 square unit. For perimeter, what we like to have them do is to write out the dimensions of it. So going around, it's 1 by 1 by 1 by 1, and you add them all up. So this has a perimeter of 4 units. And it's not 4 units squared, that'd be area. It's just 4 units. It's distance. For our next piece, we're looking at our x tile. The perimeter of this is x units squared. Pretty straightforward, it's 1 times x. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to label each side or each dimension of these pieces. So this length right here is x, the other side length is x. The perimeter is how many x's do you have and how many 1's do you have? Well, in this case, I have 2 x's and 2 holes, so this is 2x plus 2 units. Lastly, we're going to look at our x squared tile. So our area for this is x squared units squared. So what this means is if x is 5, 5 would become this letter. So it would be 5 squared. 5 times 5 is 25. The area would be 25 units squared. If x were equal to 10, it would be 10 squared. So this would be 100 squared units. Now for the perimeter, what you have to do is label each side length or each dimension. We know that these are all x lengths. They're all the same, but they're all unknown. And you ask yourself, well, how many x's do I have? In this case, I have 4. So that makes our answer 4x units.